Once upon a time in Tudor England, there was a king named Henry VIII who had 6 wives, but today's mess centers on wife no. 2 and Boleyn. Now, before we get into the juicy bits, let's set the stage. We're talking 16th century England, a time when the British monarchy was as tangled as the plot of Game of Thrones. And our girl finds herself smack dab in the middle of it. Now, Henry VIII was a king with a whole lot of nothing, and I mean that in the sense that he wanted a son. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, had given him a daughter, Mary, but no male heir. And Henry was desperate to cement his dynasty. Enter Anne Boleyn, a woman who didn't just walk into Henry's life, she sashayed in, looked him up and down, and said, "Hey, king, you need some lovin'." And then she friend-zoned him, repeatedly. Yes, and didn't play games. She wasn't here to waste time. And in a world where women were property, she knew exactly how to stir the royal pot. You see, and wasn't your typical damsel. She didn't wait around for a prince to sweep her off her feet. She was the one calling the shots. And when Henry came along, she played hard to get. And then once he was hooked, she kept him chasing. This is a dangerous game. For a woman, especially one who wasn't even born into royalty, but wasn't just any woman. She came from a kind of noble family that was just royal adjacent enough to play political chess. Her father had been a secretary to Henry's grandfather, and her mother was the sister of 2 royal mistresses. So Anne understood the rules of the game, and she wasn't afraid to break them. For example, Henry was already hitched to Catherine of Aragon. But that didn't stop Anne from flirting with other nobles, even publicly humiliating Catherine, all while keeping the king at arm's length. Now, you might think this was crazy, reckless even. But Anne wasn't just playing hard to get, she was sending a message. She wasn't going to be anyone's property, not even the king's. And that took guts, because in their society, a woman's reputation could be her only protection. Once that was gone, she had nothing left. But Anne wasn't just playing for keeps, she was playing to win. She was smart, witty, and charming. She spoke 5 languages. She was a true Renaissance woman, and she knew exactly what Henry wanted, a son. Sure, he'd proclaimed that his marriage to Catherine was doomed, that she was nothing but a barren woman. But those claims couldn't stand up in court. Getting an annulment would be a public relations nightmare. So instead, Henry did the logical thing. He invented a whole new church. The Church of England. Anyone? Yeah, that's the one. He broke away from the Catholic Church, made himself supreme head of the Church of England, and voila, he could divorce Catherine and marry Anne. Bam, problem solved. Well, except for the whole giving me a son thing, but we'll get to that. In 1533, Anne became queen, and not just any queen, a glamorous, sharp-tongued power player who knew exactly how to stir the royal pot. She appointed her ladies-in-waiting and was living the dream, or so it seemed. Behind the scenes, however, things were unraveling. She might have broken the mold for a woman in power, but she still had to play by the rules of the game. And Henry's obsession with having a son wasn't going away, and gave birth to a girl, Elizabeth. And Henry was like, cute, but where's the boy? Anne, ever the cunning politician, tried to secure her power base. But by 1536, her enemies at court, many of whom were jealous of Anne's influence, began whispering in the king's ear. The charges against her were explosive: adultery, incest, plotting to kill the king. It was basically a Tudor-era tabloid meltdown. Whether or not any of it was true didn't really matter. Henry needed Anne gone. He needed to move on to his next conquest, Jane Seymour, who, surprise, gave him a son. So in 1536, just 3 years after becoming queen, Anne Boleyn lost her head. Literally executed by sword, not axe, because Henry was feeling merciful. But here's the kicker: her daughter, that little disappointment named Elizabeth, went on to become one of the greatest monarchs in British history, Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, the one who turned England into a global power. And Boleyn might have died disgraced, but her legacy lived on in the most unlikely of places, her daughter, and was a queen who reshaped religion, rewrote the rules of power, and birthed a ruler who would eclipse them all. She was too clever for her own good, too powerful for a fragile king, and too unforgettable to ever be truly silenced, even without her head. And that's real power, people, the kind that even death can't stop. So remember Anne Boleyn, the woman who dared to say no to a king and changed the course of history forever.